Hi there, welcome to this week's Record Rangers podcast with our sponsors NordVPN. Never miss a minute of action while keeping your data safe at home or abroad. I'm your host, Douglas Dickie, here to give the fans' eye view from the Copland Cantilever, and I'm joined by my erstwhile colleagues, Andy Newport and Scott McDermott. Normally I would try to come up with a funny pun or a funny joke at your expense before I introduce you gents, but I don't think Rangers fans are in the mood for joking this week. Heartbreak, Tynecastle terror show, whatever you want to call it. The league challenge that it looked so promising just a few weeks ago lies in tatters. Rangers obviously 2-1 defeat to Hearts, 7 points now off the top spot with just 3 games to go. The season in real danger of petering out and now question marks over the manager. Monday obviously couldn't really have gone much worse. A kind of half-decent start, although I do feel the first half performance has taken on kind of mythical, a bit of a mythical status. It wasn't that good, it was okay. But Rangers certainly had the chance to bury a Hearts team that looked at that stage like the occasion had got the better of them. Obviously going at half-time, 1-0 up, we come out and Hearts come right out the box as we all, everyone watching the game knew they would, or the only people that didn't appear to know they would were the guys on the park and the guys in the Rangers dugout. My opinion at the moment is there's some guys in that Rangers team have got a real misplaced sense of arrogance about them. I'm thinking of guys like Dujon Sterling and Nico Raskin, who I don't think have achieved in football what they seem to think they have. And just really, another wasted season. Scott, what was your kind of thoughts after the game? It's very, very difficult to pick any positives from it. There was no positives. It's just been a complete shambles the last 2 weeks.
I hard to disagree with it, and you've said, Douglas. My overriding feeling after the game was just how predictable it all was. Because we've been in this movie with Rangers, it feels like so many times before. A game, as you say, I think you're probably right. The first half performance was a bit kind of over-egged, but they were certainly the dominant side in the first half. And what they deserved to be in front. Might have been 2 goals in front. But even then, even in a game where they were on top, I said to Andy, when we were sitting at Tynecastle, they were still flimsy in the final third. Weren't they ruthless? There was occasions where they had breakaways and were very wasteful. I even thought, getting on to your point about kind of inflated egos, I even thought towards the end of the first half, rather than going for a second, a few players were actually like sauntering. It was as if they got it into their heads. Look, we've won the battle already. We're the top dogs here. This is the way the full 90 minutes are going to go. So they seemed quite happy to get at half time 1-0 up, presumably thinking they were going to come out and produce the same performance in the second. Obviously, Hearts made a change, get an extra body in midfield where they were being kind of overrun in the first half, and it made a big difference. But I reminded Andy the day when Derek McInnes was asked about that post-match, and he's probably underplaying it, doing himself a wee bit of a disservice, but as much as the change helped him, it wasn't that won them the game. It was Hearts' attitude after the half-time break. It was their aggression, it was their intensity, their tempo, they're willing to fight, they're willing to win second balls. And when that happened and Rangers suddenly were under a bit of pressure or faced a bit of adversity, as we've learned about these players, they tend to wilt and disappear and go under, basically. And that's pretty much exactly what happened in the second half. Last week we spoke to Nico Raskin and Diomande in the pre-match press conference for Hearts, and both of them were adamant. They knew what was coming for Hearts. It was going to be a fight. It was going to be a scrap. And they were adamant that they were ready for it. They were up for it. They knew what had to be done. But like a lot of Rangers players in the last 4 or 5 years, they talk a good game, but when it comes to the crunch and they need to produce it, they're nowhere to be seen. And just in terms of the bigger picture, obviously it was hugely damaging result. I'm sure we're going to talk about mentality, and whether that's the issue. Danny Rohl's tried to obviously downplay that in recent weeks. But I would just say, I mean, if you're a football team, football club, and you're fighting for a title, and you get to the business end, 5 games to go post split against your rivals, and you go into that split and lose the first 2, one at home, one away. I mean, if that's not a mentality issue, I don't really know what is.
I mean, we'd only lost 2 games all season up until this point, and now we break. And Andy, the warning signs were probably there. They were there against Falkirk, albeit it was a great comeback. We were 2-0 down after 30 minutes. They were probably there against Dundee United. The thing that's damaged Rangers the most in recent weeks is we started shipping goals at the wrong time of the season. And for me, that is a definite sign that it's a mentality thing. And the worst thing for me on Monday was even at 2-1, with a wee chance, not long after we went 2-1, I think Asgard hit the bar. But other than that, we never even put Hearts under any pressure. Hearts were completely comfortable. You never felt like there was a siege coming. It just looked like guys who didn't really believe that they had it in them to get back. And I mean, I've got to be completely honest, from a fan's point of view, it got to injury time, and I was actively hoping Rangers didn't score, because a draw obviously only helps one team, and that team would have been Celtic, because by the time it get injury time, I was like, right, well, if we can't win the league, I would obviously rather Hearts win it. And that's an absolutely dire situation to be in.
Yeah, I mean, like, just we were talking about the mentality of this team and even like the wild swings and performances. I mean, I tried to ask the question of Danny Rohl after the game, and I wasn't really sure what his answer to it was. I think he just sort of mumbled something about that's football. But these sort of wild swings have been evident all season. I mean, you even think about, the biggest results that the team's had this season have come when they played in sort of fits and spurts. I mean, I've been calling them Jekyll and Hyde Gers for the last couple of weeks. But, I mean, you think back to Celtic Park, I mean, that was a 45-minute performance there, because the first half, they were dreadful. They were very lucky that Celtic hadn't sort of run over the top of them. I think if that has been a Celtic team of yesteryear, not the sort of poor shadow that we've seen from them. And, we see that with them still very much in a title race. But I think, that could have been a sore one. It was only the fact that Celtic didn't take the chances that they created in that first half that allowed Rangers to sort of roar back in the second. Well, yeah, a much better performance. But yet again, even the Hearts game that they won at Ibrox 4-2, the first half was, very back and forth like a basketball game. It was only second half that Rangers sort of showed any sort of level of control. They get away with it at Falkirk, a dreadful first 45 minutes. They count themselves fortunate to get a goal back before half time, and then they go and run over the Falkirk in the second half. They don't really get away with it against Motherwell. Lose a game that takes all the momentum away from them, and then it leaves them in a position where they have to go to Tynecastle, and they desperately need a result. A win is all that will save their season at that point. And it's flipped. It's the first half that's the dominant performance, and they crumble in the second half. But Danny Rohl has been at pains to sort of defend the mentality of his team. Says, listen, they don't get back into a title race from 13 points behind if you've not got mentality. I think the more I think about this, I tend to disagree, because I think at 13 points behind, the pressure's off you. There's no expectation on you. It's when they get back into the pressure moments, when they get themselves back into a title race, that's when this team collapses. That's when this team, for season after season, when they've got themselves into similar positions, when it's theirs to be won, it's there to be, top of the table is there to be grasped. That's when they buckle. So, listen, for me, I think this summer has to be a summer of change, and I mean proper change. I mean, me and Scott have talked about this before in terms of, last summer, obviously a lot went on at the team, at the club, off the pitch, on the pitch, takeover, new manager, the 4th or 5th overhaul, but in how many summers. But this time it has to be about attitude. It has to be about standards. And I don't think these are the things that have been addressed. We've seen a lot of talk this week about, reintroducing a Scottish core to the team and bringing back people that know what it means. I don't necessarily think you have to have guys that are dyed-in-the-wool Rangers fans that are Glaswegians or whatever. I just think you have to have guys that, when the times get tough, that's when they perform at their best. I think there's guys that in the squad that when it gets tough, that's when they go hiding. Now, whether that's to do with the leadership group, whether that's Jack Butland and James Tavernier, who obviously we know Tavernier's leaving, do they need to be sort of replaced and new leader figures put in? I think there's an argument to be made for that. I do. I think we've seen enough from the guys, the senior guys in the squad, to tell you that they're probably just not capable of getting the job done. But I do think there's a wider discussion we had about just what type of characters that this club have been signing, because, I mean, there's so few guys that you can look at in this team that you go, in the difficult, tough moments. And I mean, when, not just in the pressure games against Celtic Hearts, but at the pressure moments, when it's really there to be won, that they stand up. Too few of these guys, as I say, just buckle when once they get themselves into the nitty-gritty of a title fight, when it's there to be grasped. That's when these guys let the supporters down, and it's happened too many times, to be honest.
Yeah, Scott, Danny Rohl's record actually against the top six is really pitiful. I know he's taking a lot of credit for getting his back in it. I've never been entirely convinced that being better than Russell Martin is really high praise. I think we were always going to close that gap at some point. The fact of the matter is, he got his back in it and within a point of top. But if things go against us this weekend, we could be 10 points behind again, having made 3 points up. And you look at his record against the top six, you look at his record against Hearts, you look at his record against Celtic. I mean, those two Celtic games at Ibrox were just, for Rangers to come out of that, we're drawing a defeat against those Celtic 11s. It was just a complete joke.
He's also, he's had a crack at 3 competitions and Europe. I mean, I know he came in the October, but I mean, he came into a semi-final against Celtic. Red card, couldn't get through that, losing extra time. As you say, the Scottish Cup defeat at Ibrox was verging on kind of unforgivable given the circumstances. So you're right, his big game record's poor. Even if you take, you're saying about losing at the weekend and going 10 points, but even if you just take it right now, 7 points behind, is a 6 point progression.
Yeah.
Is that enough? Really? Is that, as you say, is that worthy of real praise when, and it's no disrespect to Hearts, but I mean, the team you're trying to catch, aren't they used to winning titles or been top of the league or challenging for honours? So, I think in the cold light of day, you need to look at that and think, where they are now. It's been pretty disappointing. I'm sure Danny Rohl would have wanted more. I'm sure the owners would have wanted more, especially when they go in January, and really back him pretty much £10 million worth of signings, because at that point they felt, let's grab the bull by the horns. We can go and win this title, and it's obviously not happened. And of course, the thing you've not even mentioned at all is that sense of missed opportunity. I mean, you think your Champions League money, 40 million quid, a real, the potential to really change the landscape of this Premiership and Scottish football. An absolute game changer for Rangers. It would have been to get into the Champions League with that kind of money behind them, for the owners, for Rohl, for the supporters, for everybody. And that chance has been, it's not just been passed up. I mean, it's been passed up without a fight, really. So, listen, massively disappointing for them. I'm sure Danny Rohl's going to need to answer a lot of questions in the coming weeks, especially if the result doesn't go his way at the weekend. But from his point of view, and I said this the other night, I thought if he finished second this season and it was pretty narrow and Rangers had performed well post-split and made a fight of it, I thought he'd have been into next season with a lot of support, a lot of backing. I think the fans would have been behind it, as disappointed as it'd be not to win a title, if they were second behind Hearts, had made a fist of it, I think they would have backed them starting next season. What's happened now with the danger of finishing third, has put major pressure on him, I think, at the start of next season. I still don't doubt. I know there's a lot of talk about his future even now. For me, there's no doubt. Danny Rohl will start the next season as Rangers manager. But what I think these last couple of results have done and the reaction after them, he's put himself under major pressure. I mean, how many times have we said that about a Rangers manager getting into the start of a new season? If he doesn't get off to a flyer, then he's going to have some real scrutiny on him, that's for sure.
Scott, you said that he will be in charge next season. I'm going to ask both of you, though, should he be?
I think he should. And I know he's under pressure, and he's had a lot of criticism even since Monday night. I know a lot of punters aren't happy, rightly so, for all the reasons we've just talked about. But I suppose ultimately, the guy has only come in October. I think you need to. He's still a young coach. The owners and the owners and the board now have put a lot of faith in him. They've signed players, of a profile, the likes of Nadiri and Romans, Chukwani, for instance, who, are at an age where the plan is to develop them and get them better, and hopefully Rangers would hope that they'd sell them on in the future after a bit of success. I don't think they're going to look at Danny Rohl and think, it's time to get rid of him just now, because, as I say, when he came in October, it was at an all-time low for them. And I'm not saying that, as we've just discussed, I'm not saying that what he's done deserves credit or he's getting them back in the title race. That's a nonsense. He had to go and try and win the league. However, I do think he'll get the start of next season. I think they'll put enough faith in him. They'll try and back him as much as they can in the summer, because I think they've got belief in this guy. But as I touched on there, I just think for him himself, the circumstances, he's going to be under major pressure. And I've seen it before with Rangers managers getting off to a bad start in the league. First game's going to be away from home. Remember Michael Beale at Kelly dropping points, Clement at Tynecastle dropping points, Russell Martin at Firth Park. It just heaps so much pressure on them. Pressure that's already there. It just heightens it and intensifies it, and I just don't think he can afford that. I think that's the price he's going to pay for this poor end to the season.
More than that, Scott, it's not just the first league game's going to be away from home. The first Old Firm game is going to be away from home. The first game against Hearts will be back at Tynecastle next season. So there you go. There's 3 hurdles, probably all within the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season. Yep. That if you lose any of them, never mind 2 or 3 of them, put you sort of on the back foot right away. I mean, in terms of, I do agree. I do think he will get the summer and start the new season. I think he should get that. But I also think in defence of him, I think it's, you mentioned back to the state the club was in October. At that point, people were talking about this being the worst Rangers team in living memory. Okay, he's made 4 signings in January, but is it really reasonable to expect that 4 signings is going to turn around a team that was in the state it was and turn them into title-winning contenders? So what I'm trying to say is that you can't sit there on one hand and go, this is the worst team in living memory, and then go, but they should be winning the title. So,
yeah. And Andy, Douglas will be able to answer this better, but I don't think when Rohl came in, were fans really saying this guy's got to get us back challenging for the title this season? I think people had written this season off, and I'm not saying that you then just give it up and accept anything that happens this season. I think most punters had written it off, realised how bad it was, looked at some of the signings, your Aronses and Rothwells and people like that, and thought this is just a disaster season. You just need to see a bit of progression under Rohl, better players coming in. You could argue you've seen a wee bit of that. I think the likes of Romans, Nadiri and that look decent. young players.
I think the problem, Scott, is that in big games, when games have, especially when games have changed like they did at Tynecastle, Rohl hasn't impacted it. I mean, we all thought, okay, the first 15 minutes with atmosphere, and it was a special, it was an incredible atmosphere at Tynecastle on Monday night. Rangers just had to see through the first 15 minutes and play their way into the game. That's exactly what they did. Hearts came out, all guns blazing, went at Rangers for the first 15 minutes. They got through that, obviously get the goal, and then Rangers felt comfortable. But then you thought, well, the same's going to happen again in the second half. Rangers just have to get through that. But even though they get through the first sort of 15 minutes without conceding, there was never a sense that they regain control. Then that's when the Hearts obviously get themselves a couple of goals to take over. When it comes to Rohl, though, at no point, and I think you can think back to, say, the Celtic League game at home, Rangers 2-0 up, battered Celtic for 45 minutes. Celtic obviously changed things, put Hatate in there, and again, that one change to Celtic didn't prompt a response from Rangers. Whatever the response was, it didn't work. And I think that's the thing with their concerns. But I saw somebody make a point on social media this week that says, this is the choice that now faces Rangers this summer. You either stick with a guy who you brought in to reshape the squad and to rebuild it and give him the summer to go ahead and implement the alterations, the changes that he wants, or you try for the sixth time in the 6 seasons that actually we'll just rip it up and the next guy's going to come in and knock the ball at the park straight off the bat and win a league at the first attempt. That's not really how it's going to work. I mean, we're all talking about Steven Gerrard. It took him 3 goals right. This season coming will be different in the sense that Celtic are going to have the biggest rebuild that they've had in a long time. Hearts, does their team get picked apart by, this is about Jamestown Analytics. Their whole model is about developing players and selling them on. So what's it going to look like? But I really think that at some point, and again, I was saying this last summer before Russell Martin came in, but I say it again now, at some point, a Rangers board is going to have to stick by a manager, show some faith in him, and give him the time to make the changes that have to be made, because let's be honest, it's been patchwork repairs summer after summer, or a rebuild that then collapses within a couple of months. This team looks disjointed. The squad looks disjointed. There's massive goal gaps in it that need to be properly addressed. Obviously they tried, say, the right winger. They tried with Scott Wilson. Listen, I think you've got to just hold your hands up and say, has it worked? It was on paper, it was a perfect sort of siding. It just hasn't worked. Whether that's down to Danny Rohl's man management or whether Scott Wilson needs to look himself in the eye himself and ask himself where his career's going. I think that's maybe it's more towards the latter. But I think at some point Rangers are just going to have to, and that goes for the fans as much as the board, but they're just going to have to tough it out until they can get themselves in a position where a manager can get the squad and get all the pieces in the places that he needs them. Because every time that they do this, rinse and repeat act to get into October, it's not going well, season's a write-off, throw everything out and start again. It just guarantees you more wasted time and certainly more wasted money.
What do you think, Douglas? Do you think?
I do take all that on board, Andy, especially what you're saying about how we can't keep rinsing and repeating. My issue with Rohl is a couple of things. I think you still need to see some evidence that he's capable of winning a league title, and I don't see it in Rohl. I've said before, I think he's going to go on and be a good manager. I think he's going to go on and be a good coach. Right? But I think he's a coach, and I think a club like Rangers needs a manager. I still think we need a leader, a figurehead, and I'm not convinced that's what we've got right now. I mean, you can say what you like about Martin O'Neill coming back to Celtic when he's 75 or whatever. I mean, I don't think Martin O'Neill's tactical acumen is why Celtic are still in a title race, but he's acted as a figurehead for the club. And I think Rangers need something like that. Rohl is at 2 years firefighting in the Championship, and he's learning, or he should be learning, and he should have learned quicker, in my opinion, that firefighting in the Championship is very different from going for league titles in Scotland. I think I actually agree we can't just get to October and sack another manager, which is kind of why I think we should maybe do it now, because the last time we gave, I think the last time we changed manager in the summer was Gerrard, probably. Before Russell Martin's debacle. Yeah, it was probably Gerrard, and people...
Van Bronckhorst.
No, Van Bronckhorst was during the season.
No, Van Bronckhorst into Beale was into the season. Is that what you're saying? That's what I'm saying.
The last time we changed managers in pre-season, between... So the last time a manager who got the full summer saw out the season was, Gerrard.
Yeah.
And people talk about Gerrard, and quite a few people say, well, it took him 3 years to win the league and we didn't win anything. It was a very different footballing landscape in there. Rangers had finished third in the league the season before Gerrard came in. We just lost an aggregate of 9-0 in 2 games against Celtic. Celtic were a much better team. We had been knocked out of Europe by Progress Niederkorn. So you could see that development. And let's be honest here, COVID probably saved Gerrard's job. Gerrard would probably get sacked if COVID hadn't happened. So,
Douglas, but you're saying about the figurehead, right? I totally agree with you. I totally agree. Rangers need a manager. I've been banging on about this for years, and they don't seem to. Since Gerrard, I suppose you could argue was the figurehead. Even then, when he came in, you weren't sure about it because he'd never been a manager before. So if Rangers and the board and the owners wanted that, why did they go and get Martin? Why then go and get Rohl? I mean,
who knows?
Eric McInnes is staring them in the face. The perfect manager for them. I've been banging on it. I've been saying this for years. And Rangers, even Rangers fans, weren't they having it? I'm not saying you were one of them, but
Scott, I was.
It's all Douglas's fault. Just blame Douglas.
A lot of people didn't want McInnes, and look at what he's doing now. I 100% agree. At Rangers and Celtic, you need a manager, a huge personality, huge figurehead. I look at these guys that have had the Rangers job. Beale, Clement, Russell Martin, Danny Rohl. None of these guys. So clearly, the board or the people who make the decisions don't feel that way. And if they do, by the way, if that suddenly dawned on them, I agree with you. They better just make the decision now. There's no point letting Danny Rohl get to October, November, and then have to change it then. So if they're serious about going down a different route and getting a proper manager in, that kind of figurehead, they'd be as well doing it now. And you go back to Derek McInnes' door doing, or you go back and get Gerrard again. You do something like that. There's not many of these guys around that know Rangers, know the landscape, know the league. Would Ascow come into that category, even though he's no experience of Rangers and he's clearly a brilliant coach, but he does know the league. He has got a bit about him. Ascow, in terms of, he has got a bit of presence in that about him, but certainly Gerrard and McInnes, for me, if that's the route you're going down, would be the two prime candidates, surely.
I totally agree. If you're making a change, it has to be now. If they get themselves back in this position in October, then the game's a bogey. Then next season's a write-off as well. So, because if you think about, and I think this is where, Andrew Kavanagh get sort of praised at times this season for being decisive, getting rid of Russell Martin after 7 games. Say what you like, getting rid of a manager after 7 league games is, isn't an easy thing to do. Yeah, you have to admit you got it wrong. I think there's an argument they could have done it even earlier than that. I remember sitting at Ibrox doing Hotline Live just after the final whistle went, after the Bruges game at home, the 3-1 defeat. And I thought already at that point, it looked like Russell Martin was done in the eyes of supporters. They waited another 6 weeks. It cost them another 7 points. You then had the sort of 3-4 weeks it took them to go and replace him. The dance they did with Kevin Muscat, the dance they did with Gerrard before they eventually, Danny Rohl was into the process and pulled out and then get pulled back into it. They dropped points against Dundee United. So, there's 9 points that they basically gave up after the Bruges game at home. He probably should have went after the Bruges game away. So there's 9 points. If they had those 9 points back, if Danny Rohl had come in at that point, Steven Gerrard had come in at that point, you can still be in the title race right now. What I'm saying is they cannot dither and procrastinate like they did last time and then find themselves just wasting more time, wasting another season. Rangers fans' patience is wearing so thin. So I think if they're going to make a decision, I think it calls for decisiveness. It won't be easy to sack a manager who, came into a team 13 points adrift, has cut the gap, but shot caller hasn't got them over the line because, as everyone says, it's the worst squad in living memory. Well, no surprise that they're not going to be title winners. It might be harsh, but if it's the thing that Kavanagh thinks is the right thing to do, he has to do it, and he has to do it now. I totally agree with you. But if they decide that this is the guy that they're going to back, then they have to back him all the way, and they have to back him through to January. They have to back him through to next summer and beyond, because otherwise, then you're just in this cycle of doing what they've been doing for 4 and 5 years.
See, we talk about decisive decision making, and does that include like when Scotland's best strikers available on a free transfer and like waiting for Rangers to come in, you dither and then ultimately decide against it. I mean,
that's not in Danny Rohl.
It's not, but it's a club, and when it comes down to
had the chance to sign Lawrence Shankland and turn their nose up that. Yeah, this is a multitude of failures that go on over 4 or 5 years. Well, of course, Lawrence Shankland should have signed for Rangers, but that's with hindsight. But yeah, he should have been signed. Of course, they should have got Derek McInnes.
Yeah,
but those decisions are made. It's now about what happens going forward, and what happens going forward is that either they act now or they have to stick by Danny Rohl through thick and thin. Otherwise, the next season just goes the way that this season's gone, the way that last season's gone, the way that the season before it has gone.
Anyway, obviously, unfortunately, the season's not finished yet. We've got another three games to enjoy or endure, depending on how you look at it. Of course, this weekend's, it's still a big game. It's a strange situation. It's a bigger game for Celtic than it is for Rangers. It's not often that's the case in an old firm. But
listen, Rangers cannot give up this game and think. I mean, I don't mean just from a pride point of view. I mean, there's still Champions League football to be played for. That is, okay, it's not the title, but there's also a chance that if you get Champions League football and knock Celtic down to the Europa League, everything that they're going to have to do this summer. And listen, it's not the prize that it once was, in the sense that obviously with Hearts being on the scene now, that they're to be contended with, obviously. But if you can knock Celtic down and limit their resources, and obviously they've got this rainy day fund. If you make them have to eat into that rainy day fund, that's 70 million quid in the bank, then the amount of signings that they're going to have to do. I mean, you're talking about 16, 17 players that will likely come in and out of Celtic Park this summer. That would put a huge dent in their ability to recover, like they did after the 55 season. At that point, we're all talking about, had Rangers qualified for the Champions League that season after 55, then it could have been a chance for Rangers to really rebalance Scottish football. I'm not saying overtake Celtic, but it could have rebalanced Scottish football, and they missed that opportunity. It looks like they're going to miss the sort of guaranteed qualification for the Champions League. But if they can get in the second round of the Champions League, deny that to Celtic, make them eat into their resources and have to really dig deep because of the number of players that are going to come in and out, that could help sort of, what a situation that would be if you find that Hearts, if they can get through their playoff round, that, wow, what an incredible sort of landscape you'd find at that point with Hearts with a big chunk of cash from the Champions League, with Jamestown's analytics behind them. If Rangers could get second, qualify for the Champions League, with Celtic having to sort of not quite have the financial might that they once have, then I think you've got a really competitive playing field. But I appreciate what I'm saying. There's a lot of buts and maybes, but what I'm saying is that Rangers can't give up. The season is done now because they can't catch Hearts. They have to still be going to try and catch Celtic and get in that second place.
And I mean, Scott, let's be honest here. I'm sure I speak for every single Rangers fan. Would much rather see Hearts win the league than Celtic. So there's also, that kind of subplot of it. In fact, I think, I thought maybe Hearts could actually have won the league this weekend. Can see what they can't quite, can they? So, there's also that. I guess it's not mathematically impossible that Rangers could still win the league. So the players need to kind of go in with that attitude and think that, if something happened, well, they would need things to go their way at Fir Park on Saturday night. Obviously, I mean, how do you see Rohl approaching this game? He's obviously got 1-1 at Parkhead, but that was that was against Wilfred Nancy. O'Neill, I wouldn't say he's got Rohl's number because Rangers have been probably the better team in both games at Ibrox, even though we didn't get the job done. But what do you see him doing on Sunday to try and lift the players, lift the fans, and just try and get a result? Our recent record at Parkhead is actually really good. So
I don't see him making too many changes, to be honest. I don't think he's got that many options. I expect Romans to start, obviously, at left back. It would be a change. Whether he goes with Tavernier or Sterling at right back, I'm not sure. Looks like John Souttar's going to be out, so the centre backs I don't think will change.
For Olsen?
I don't think you'll see Skov Olsen at Celtic
Park. I actually thought he had a slightly better first half on Monday. Fun enough, I thought there was some signs of.
We spoke about this, Douglas, at the game. He was okay in the sense that he kept the ball very safe.
But he also, I don't think, Andy, there was a few times I thought he made some right good runs and people, the passing was terrible.
But even then, there was times he got into positions. So there was even times where he got into positions and there was a chance there for him to take on his man and he didn't really do it.
And then obviously he's at fault for Hearts.
Yeah, he's sleeping safe at them. I did the Mamba Man ratings for the paper and I went sort of safe in the first half, sleeping in the second half. I don't think you'll see him again in a Rangers jersey. I can't imagine it.
Has he taken a man on since he's arrived? I don't know if he has. I don't think you'll see him either. Listen, somebody like Conor Barron might come in, Douglas, into midfield, give him a wee bit more dig, wee bit more tenacity. But aside from that, I don't see that much changing. The big question mark again, listen, I know Danny Rohl has to get his team right and his tactics right. That goes without saying. And it was actually Danny Rohl that made a change, if you remember, at Parkhead the last time that swung the game in Rangers' favour. But I go back to the players again. I mean, I've heard people saying in the last few days, well, this is typical Rangers. It will suit them, go to Parkhead, pressure off, and they'll probably go there and win and produce a performance. I'm not sure about that. I mean, you touched on it there. Celtic have got so much to play for. I mean, their crowd. I mean, I watched their game against Falkirk recently at home, and the crowd was raucous that day. They were up for it. They sense that they can, from nowhere, they can still go and win this title. I think the atmosphere will be certainly the home atmosphere will be incredible, and I think with that pressure and that intensity, and Rangers players pretty much knowing they're out of the title race, I think Celtic will go at them, and it's about how they handle it. And as we've touched on, they tend not to be great at handling those moments or those kind of situations. So I might be wrong. I mean, maybe they will go there with a bit of expectation off, and without a home crowd, an Ibrox crowd behind them, and they might produce a performance and get a result. But I must admit, I don't see it. I think when the way Parkhead will be, how much Martin O'Neill will have those players up for it, sensing that knowing they've still got Hearts at home, they can still go and win this title. I struggle to see how a Rangers team who have now lost 2 in the bounce put themselves out the title race. I struggle to see. I'm struggling to see how they go to Celtic Park and win.
Yeah, I've got to agree with you, Scott. To be honest, I'd be surprised they went there and won. And Andy, you get any thoughts on what the team might be? Will he spring any surprises on us? Do you think the Deary will start, for example? He was on the bench on.
Yeah, I mean, I think Danny Rohl spoke last week about there might be occasions where he's going to have to gamble. I'd be surprised if he gambles with a hamstring injury. I mean, the likelihood is that Rangers are going to be back, and certainly back for pre-season in pretty short order after this season ends. Obviously back probably late June, early July. They really want to sort of. Obviously, he's had a hamstring injury. He came back, obviously played 20 minutes the other night. If you risk that again, and unless there's something, the game's really close, I can't imagine him coming in and playing 90 minutes and then you risk him being out for, 8-10 weeks when you've got such an important start to next season. No, I think it'll be pretty similar to what we saw the other night. Obviously, Roman's coming in. I would imagine at left back. Probably Sterling, I would say, goes at right back to Kota Maeda. And then I think the only other change would probably be Gassama, maybe even Antman. I'm surprised Antman's not been given more of a sniff. I really thought he would be the guy that got the shootout for Tynecastle. Didn't see the Scov Olsen one at all. That was a really big call from Danny Rohl, and it just didn't work. So I would, maybe that's the one, but yeah, I think it would be pretty samey. I think Barron come back in the midfield. I think a lot of fans have been kind of surprised, given just how well he was playing before his injury, the sort of January time, given as well that he's got a World Cup to be sort of trying to battle into. I would have thought if you're Danny Rohl, there's a guy that's not just get motivation to win a league, a guy who has to try and fight his way into a Scotland squad for the World Cup. He'd be somebody you'd be desperate to sort of unleash and let him go and show how keen he is. I mean, listen, we all know that Connor Barnes not going to win a Ballon d'Or anytime soon, but what he gives this team at times is a tenacity and energy, and I think a calmness as well. I think it's a calmness that Rangers have really lacked at times, especially recently. He's somebody that just puts his foot in the ball and picks the simple pass, but also the right pass. I think at times Rangers have been guilty of being, aimless in midfield. There was times in the second half they just needed somebody just to breathe on the ball a bit, and they were just kicking it away and felt like giving possession back to Hearts at a time when Hearts didn't need any extra encouragement to go at them. So, maybe that way. But as I say, I think I maybe been one that's made this sort of argument Scott's talking about, that it would be nothing more Rangers-like than to lose at Tynecastle on a Monday night and then go and win at Celtic Park. But I think the mentality questions of this squad just make that really unlikely. I think this is a squad that, as I've said at the beginning of the show, that when the pressure's on, and the pressure is still on them because the knives will be out for them if they lose on Sunday. I think this is when they tend to crumble rather than stand up.
Wow, what a cheery episode, lads. I really enjoyed that. Thanks.
Not cathartic at all. Not cathartic at all, that was, no.
It's a counselling session for you.
I bet. Oh, it's been, let's just say I've not been in a particularly good mood this week. I think it's fair to say looking forward to the summer holidays. In all honesty, this end of the season can't come quick enough now. Ironically changed my shifts. I'm actually working this weekend. I'd changed my shift so I could have the last day of the season off, just in case. What a great decision that was.
He's the jinx. He's the one who's jinxed it.
I know. I went as long as I could without doing it because I didn't want to jinx it. But I thought, well, I better just do it just in case. So you can all blame me, right, lads? We'll leave it there. I think before I start greeting on screen. So hopefully we're in a bit of better mood next week. With a bit of pride intact, but. We shall see. Thanks to Andy, thanks to Scott, and thanks for watching, and we'll catch you again. Cheers. We're going to get absolutely